On this episode of the Pep Talk podcast, we are digging deep as we close out this series on choosing intentional manhood. You don't want to miss it. But first, I have a question for you. Have you had your dose of pep today? No? Don't worry. I've got you. Now let's dig into it. Welcome to the Pep Talk podcast, the podcast that cheers you on and coaches you up. I'm your host, Coach Jay, a life coach in DFW, and I'm just glad to be here with you today. Like I said in the opening, we are closing out our mini series on choosing intentional manhood. And today I have an absolute gift for you. Remember, this series is for men and for those who love them. So there's something here for everybody. And I want you to stay tuned. This is going to be an incredible conversation that I have with our guest for today, Mr. Ralph Bessard. We're going to meet him as soon as we get back, and it's going to be an amazing conversation. Just absolutely incredible. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back with my conversation with Ralph Bessard. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this episode of the Pep Talk podcast. It's your boy, Coach Jay, and I'm so happy that y'all are hanging out with us as we close out this series on choosing intentional manhood. I've gotten great feedback from various places, from various sources, and so that makes me particularly excited about this episode because I believe that the guest that we have here, someone that I've just met, but I already consider to be a brother, my best friend, the guy that I aspire to be like in the future, minus the hair, because genetics don't work like that. um, but Pep Squad, I want to introduce to you Mr. Ralph Bessard, the man, the myth, the legend, a leadership guru, an entrepreneur, a coach, a speaker. I really don't know what he doesn't do, but he's gifted, and we are blessed to have him here on the Pep Talk podcast. Ralph, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, Coach Jay, Justin, thank you so much, man, for allowing me to be here today. It is my honor and privilege to be with you and ready to talk to the Pep Squad. So I am just so blessed with meeting you. And again, I sit with great expectation and just a wonderful amazement about what we're going to be able to talk about today in the short time that you and I have known each other. Our discussions, our conversations, heck, even our just little emails have been powerful and amazing. So I'm excited for what's about to occur, and hopefully we will be able to share a little bit with some people that helps make their walk a little lighter and brighter. So again, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't you introduce yourself? I know I gave just like a really, really broad overview of what you do, but why don't you tell us, man, who are you? Introduce yourself.
Well, again, Ralph Bessard, and just a little bit about myself. I am have been an entrepreneur now for over 30 years. My wife and I started a company called Conquer Credit Management Incorporated. We do help people with, basically the typical of like credit restoration. We do consultation and coaching. We've worked with a lot of high net worth individuals. I will not name drop, but some of them are household names. I got involved in ministry probably about 25 years ago, a little over, and I'm an ordained pastor. Pastor a small church in Southern California here, and have recently, over the last decade now, moved into discipleship training and leadership development.
Okay.
Most of my life, I've kind of been thrust in those positions, albeit most of the time during that time, reluctantly, not really seeing that I was equipped for it or in a place that like trying to figure out how did I hoodwink and bamboozle people to get into this place. But God definitely had something else for me. And so with that, over this last year, I really settled down in my spirit and understood that there was something that I needed to leave with the world. And I think it was probably understanding that I'm looking at, I have two older boys, Jordan and Justin. One is Jordan is 29, Justin 27, and then my wife and I had our little how do you say, our little love child at the end there. He's Julian, who is 12 years old. And so,
Woo.
and
God,
just
hey,
kind of seeing them go into the next stages with their life, and they're making their connections with their girlfriends and fiancés, I realized that, wait a second, there's something else that I need to be able to share, that I wanted to be able to leave with them. So,
amen.
again, you get into that place where your mortality starts to kind of kick in. Even though I'm young and virile and in shape, I realized that, you know what, there's something you can do to leave a profound message. And
Right.
that is how I moved into that place to then extend myself to be an author. And I was able to write Shape to Lead, discover your unique leadership style, empower your team, and create massive impact. And that was the hope, is that I wanted to help a bunch of people, anybody that I can, get beyond some of the debilitating thoughts, limiting beliefs that they may have themselves, and realize that they have a significant value here in life. And
Right.
that if you walk on this planet, you're probably leading somewhere.
Come on.
Someone is taking their clues from you. And
Come
so I
on.
wanted to take some of all of that mystery out of it, and realize that when we begin to seek the sound of the genuine voice that's within us, we can tap into a supernatural power that comes from God. That's our DNA. And so I realized that I wanted to be able to create a book that was, again, not so highbrow, that was conversational, that was relatable, that was transparent, and hopefully let people know that, hey, I really see them. And
Yeah.
I wanted them to be able then to begin, initially maybe just to use my voice and my eyes, so that they can begin to see themselves, and then begin to embrace what I've come to learn, which is that we all play a part in making a difference, that we should be the difference that we want to see. And so that's what Shape to Lead is all about. Really, not necessarily telling people what to do, but trying to remind them of who they are. And so that's a little bit about, I feel like the calling of my life is to just kind of come in and be like, hey, you know, I'm here to love with deep resolve. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that you understand that you are significant. You are not here by chance. You're not here by happenstance. You are not a mistake. You are here for a time and season such as this. And let's live the mission, the assignment, and walk with purpose. So,
I love that.
yeah,
I love it.
that's
I
it.
love, like, every single thing that you said there, especially when you kind of talked about your life mission, to really be able to speak into the lives of others and say, one, you are leading somebody,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it was Shakespeare. I reference this all the time. It was Shakespeare that said, "All of life is a stage." Like,
Amen.
whether you know it or not, there is always somebody in the peanut gallery somewhere who's watching what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Um, so they're watching how well you handle your adversity. They're watching how well you handle, the mountaintop portions of life. Do you allow it to change you, or are you using it to pull other people up? And then also the second thing you mentioned, that's something that I deeply identify with, is the power of encouraging others. Like just having a word just to say, you know, I don't care about the circumstances around which you got here. You're here. Like
Yeah.
the fact that you're here is not an accident. So now let's talk about the reason why, and let's dig into, as you said, those unique aspects of you and how you can use them to impact. Um, I told you we have 5 kids. We have 2 boys and 3 girls, and
God bless you.
uh,
That's amazing.
and
Awesome.
so you talked about your love child that's 12 years old now.
Yes.
My wife and I we have 19, we have 15, we have 10, 8, and we have a 6-year old. The 6-year old that was that was a love child where we thought we were done,
Right?
and then all of a sudden, gotta love the love child, man. Gotta
Yeah, I
love
mean,
the love
it's
child.
amazing. It's so funny. I still remember when she called to tell me here I was, my middle boy was on his way to being a sophomore in high school, and I'm like, "Whoo, we got 3 more years to go to college. He'll be in college. We're good." And she calls me on the freeway and says we're pregnant, and I'm like, "Wait, what? How did that happen?" And she says, "Ralph, you know how that happened."
No, that's facts, man. Um, and so yeah, for all of those reasons, man, I'm excited to really dig into, and I really want to use your book as a reference for this. Uh, Number one is a way to plug your book, but number two, because I think that what you talk about in the book, this whole shaped method, it ties perfectly into this mini series that I've been doing on choosing intentional manhood, and including myself in that bunch. I would say that men, we have, like our name out in these streets is not where it
Mm,
should be.
yeah, yeah,
um and so my charge has been, men, we have to do better. And
yes.
so, I've talked about, the importance of being self-aware. I've talked about the importance of having male friendships, because research shows that there are fewer enriching male friendships now than there has been at any other time in history, in
I
recorded
agree.
history. Um,
Absolutely.
and so we've been talking about these things, but I kind of want to talk today about what it looks like for a man to lead authentically and genuinely. Because we don't come into this world, let's face it, we don't come into this world knowing how to lead. I remember when my oldest daughter was born, I was like, okay, cool. You know, I I I've always related, I think, more to girls than I have to boys, just because I was
Mhm.
the artistic kid in school. But when my son was born, I was
Ooh,
horribly
ooh. Uh,
afraid, because I didn't even feel like a man.
mm,
So how was I going to raise a man?
wow, wow. You know, I want first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for sharing that because I think that when you alluded to the fact that how difficult it is for men to make friendships or relationships. It's something about women. They innately have the ability almost to do that. They
Yeah.
create sisterhoods and they can do it later in life. To piggyback on that thought just for a moment, we think about we make those relationships as men, or I should say at the time as boys, fairly easily, whether it's
Hmm.
elementary, junior high. And I think if you go back and kind of look over the history of your life, you'll find out some of the boys that you still talk to and run with who really know you in a very deep and transparent way are probably your boys from high school and before high school. I know that's initially a little bit with me. Now I've had some friends that because we had kids that were going to school together, and because of the community we found ourselves in, we started to develop some relationships, and I'm pretty cool with them. But
Yeah.
it's those guys that knew me, whether it was in junior high, high school, that really, really know me, right? And so what ends up happening a lot of times, if you're lucky enough to keep that long lasting relationship, maybe you're able to go back to that place and tell them some of your fears, some of your doubts, some of your
Hmm.
struggles. But very similar to you. I have 3 boys, but I remember when the oldest one was born. My wife and I was 21 when I met my wife. Wasn't necessarily looking to get into this place that I thought we were going to be together for the rest of our life. I knew I
Yeah.
loved her, but again, I grew up. My mother and father were divorced when I was very young, and so I didn't have a whole lot of you know deep understanding of that marriage relationship because believe it or not, all my friends were raised by single mothers. Their parents were divorced.
Mm.
So here it was. I'm now with my wife, and we're trying to make her. She's 20 at the time, and then a couple years later, I'm turning 24. We find out we're pregnant. Now I'm going to tell you, very much like you, I loved how you said that you were so worried about bringing a male into the world
Yeah.
and how you didn't feel like one. I had the very same feeling. I was like,
Mm.
I could barely balance a checkbook. And now I'm responsible for teaching this little boy or this baby on how to become a man. And I realized, and here goes the part, because I was a pretty precocious young man. I was pretty astute. Most of the time I was probably, because I was self-aware, a little very critical of myself. So I was aware of what I knew, but I was also really aware of what I didn't know.
Same
And
here.
so I played it safe. I leaned to the things that were my strengths, and I learned how to perform. Right. I learned how to kind of
Ooh.
keep people off of me, and I could talk big, I could bark big. And so I learned how to perform. But I was not going to stretch. I was not going to go over to that area and let anybody know what I didn't know. So you want to know something crazy? And I don't know that my mother even knows this. Well, I'm sure she does, but I think my wife was she was probably 5 months pregnant before I told my mother that we were pregnant. I was
Wow.
I was so freaked out. I didn't tell anybody. I was spooked, man. I was going to work. I was showing up places, and I was spooked. I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go down. I was spooked. My wife was so proud, and even though she, my mother at the time was in living in Texas, we were in California. So her, my mother and her had a relationship, but I was really guarded about how I wanted to tell my mother, and I know that probably hurt my wife for a very long time. For those first couple of months, because I didn't want to tell anybody, and she was like, "What's
Hmm.
your problem?" And it was just because I was having a hard time saying, like, hey, do I know what it takes to be a dad or be a father? Because again, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Oakland, California. And although I have a great relationship with my father, he was a couple hundred miles away. He was in Central
Yeah.
California at the time. So I saw him on holidays and I could call him. I always had access. My mother and father had a wonderful working relationship. And I can honestly tell you, I did not miss a beat in my childhood. I had a wonderful childhood. Other than having your father there to teach you how to be a man every day, I didn't
Yeah.
miss anything like that. Wasn't aware that I was until I
Yeah.
got to that place and I realized I was making up manhood the whole time.
Okay. So first off, big ups to your parents for cultivating that relationship for your sake, because it's hard. It's really
Mhm.
hard.
Yes.
Um, but so I was adopted. Um, and my adoptive parents are my grandparents. So I was adopted
Okay.
into the family. Um, I really didn't get to know my biological dad until I was around 21, 22, because my wife told me, I'm not going to marry you until you know where you come from.
Mm,
Okay.
Wrong woman.
Um, yeah, that's why we marry up, man. That's why we marry up.
Yeah,
And
amen.
so my grandfather, he was a worker, man. He was from that generation where you show your love by working. So he worked two jobs. He was a teacher, a driver's ed instructor, and he also did old school newspaper routes. So he would get up at, he'd go to bed at like 5 o'clock, wake up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, go throw his route, come home, and go to work. That was his thing. Now he showed up for me in high school. He was he was a choir booster parent and all that stuff. But as far as us having those conversations, like
Yeah.
when I would get in trouble, then I'd get the very stern talking to. But as far as here's what it takes to be a man,
Yes.
and like you said, I performed my way into uh, a pseudo image of what I thought manhood was. And I've been thinking about that a lot
Yeah.
over these last few weeks, especially over this series, man. when you said that you performed, like you weren't going to let anybody know that you didn't know what you were doing.
Absolutely. Like, listen, in Oakland, it's so funny. I was talking to another friend of mine, and we were kind of having this conversation. My first inclination of manhood, again, and I'm gonna date myself here, and obviously it was a little before my time, but I got to see those reruns, and I just thought he was magic. I saw John Shaft. When I saw the
Hey,
afro, hey, I saw
shut your
the
mouth.
afro, the turtleneck, and the leather coat. Man, you couldn't tell me nothing else, right? It was like Shaft was it. Like that. That's what it is to be a man. Now you gotta understand. Now here I am coming of age in Oakland, California. Now I lived in an area where my mother sent me to school, sent me to the best schools. So I was always around diversity, but in Oakland, near Berkeley and San Francisco, very liberal area. But here's the thing. I learned also how to perform in different scenarios. Sometimes I was traveling through the hood. So you see certain things and then you find yourself
Yeah,
in suburbia and you have to perform in that area. And so here's what I learned a lot of times. You pick up certain things in the street, how to be tough and walk with this presence, right?
yeah,
How to kind of talk to the ladies and then begin to define your masculinity through how
right.
many girls you date or whatever it may be. And so I got good at that. I got good at being able. I remember me and my friends actually like, man, there's not really any place I can't go. It's like, I ended up in suburbia, and it's like I know I was raised by educators. My mother was,
Same.
president of colleges. My father was a teacher. Grandparents were teachers. So
Yep,
guess what? I can speak with the best of them. So I
yep.
know how to do this education thing. But then guess what? I played in the hood. I played football and basketball in the hood. So it was like I had cousins who were in the hood. So guess what?
Hmm.
I knew how to handle myself there as well. And so now you kind of feel like, wait, I can always have this kind of purview where I felt like I had a mountain view over the valley. And so it's like, who do I need to be in this moment to get what I want? And
Right.
so that is where the performance came in. And so I never really worried about my time about understanding or developing in those weak areas to get to a place called discovery where true growth occurs. I just tried to perform to try to get over. I remember even telling my little brother, like, hey, man, sometimes it's just about faking it to make it. Just keep them off you, like hustle, hustle.
Yeah.
And it catches up to you. And so,
Yes.
when my baby Jordan, my oldest, was coming into the world, I realized how unprepared I was to play this next role. I was like, I'm not gonna be able to fake this. And my wife felt it as well because she was like, we're good. Like, what's going on with you?
Mm.
Like, why are you so afraid of this next section of life? Now, again, she grew up in a single parent family, and her family was not as tight as mine was. So she needed some level of connection from me. But because
Yeah.
I'm running around like an imposter, I performed even in that relationship and struggled sometimes with intimacy with her. And she became very aware of it when she was having that child.
That's crazy. We have a lot of intersecting points. Um because I remember there was I forget what happened, but I remember my wife looked at me and she said, the man that I saw when we were dating, um the confident, have it all together guy, where is what happened to him? Like you
Yeah.
the the guy that I'm seeing now is so unsure and almost fragile. And I mean, my wife is really, really wise. She's really astute. She's very discerning, so she can see to the heart of things in a really, really, really easy way. Um, and that was one of those moments for me that really showed me, yo, your performance, like it's not gonna take you any farther than it's taking you right now. You're gonna have to, you know, take the mask off, and you're going to have to work your way into finally becoming who you are supposed to be.
Ooh, talk about it. Yes. I think, one of the things that became that was a big moment for me, was that, again, when we start kind of having that very moment that you just discussed, and we become really aware that, wait, something's missing. There's something here that I need. There's that old saying that, when the student's ready, the teacher comes.
Hmm.
And for me, I got to that place as my child was coming into the world, and I became definitely aware of I could not fake it to make it here at this moment. I started trying to put some things together, but again, I reverted to only what I knew. I tried to do some things in my own strength, and I was crashing and burning, just crashing and burning. I was arguing with the wife a little too much. I know that she's a very strong woman, had way more wisdom than me at the time, and
Yeah.
she was, she's a fighter. And so she was like, "No, we're going to make this." She got involved with not with church. Now, here's the funny thing about it. My wife and I, we have a mixed marriage. My wife grew up in the Jewish faith and
Okay.
then became a believer. And what was funny was that she started going to church. Now, I had been to church. I had grew up and went to the Christian schools and things, but I can honestly tell you, I did not have a working relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is that she started going to church and started asking me to come with her. I was heavily involved in watching my football and doing certain things, but at the time, I knew I was trying to make it work with her. Well, the moment you open yourself up, God can do some great and amazing things. And he
Indeed.
brought a mentor in my life, and it was the exact mentor who I needed in that moment. And he was, I just remember he was a big, tall, strong man who loved his wife, had peace in his house. I remember the first time I went to visit his house, it was clean, but more importantly, it was something about the air. You just kind of went and you were like, wow, there's no chaos in this house. Like
You
I
can tell
feel
the
like,
difference.
yeah, the way his wife and his daughters were operating with him, and the way he had this spot on tenderness and love with them, I was like, wait a second, this is possible.
Hmm.
Well, he met me exactly where I was, and he hit me with that. He says, Ralph, he says, I want you to stop kicking yourself, because if you had known better, you could have done better, right?
Mm.
And that sat with me. And before he even introduced Jesus to me on a deeper level, he just loved me where I was at. He didn't bring up the Bible, although he was talking about biblical principles. He didn't tell me what to do. All he kept speaking to was reminding me of who I was created to be. And so he invited me finally, after several weeks, maybe like even close to 3 months of just kind of working with me and mentoring me and loving me. He invited me to Bible study. And that was when I gave my life to the Lord. I remember not being a person that was really a hugger, always trying to do things on my own. But on that particular day, it was as if he was reading my life from scripture. And I was almost like, how come nobody ever told me this? And albeit there have been people had been giving me certain seeds. But again, I was unwilling, going back to what I've written in the book, I was unwilling or unable at the time to embrace my unique shape,
Yeah.
because I just wasn't aware of it. And through his help, I realized that I had a unique shape, that I had been shaped for a time and a season such as this. And him loving me the way that he did and helping me to find my mission, my assignment, and my purpose. Oh my goodness, things really changed for me in that moment. And so I'm so grateful to this day. Pastor Maxie James, that's just a plug for him. He was just a amazing mentor who had a wonderful way of taking the Word of God, making it practical, so that we could apply it in our life. And that's where I've kind of tried to grow from. And I operate now with the understanding that the first and foremost, what you have to help people to do is get them to consider a new perspective. I think
Yes.
that so much of what we do sometimes is that we argue and fight, or we try to manipulate people into a certain place. And it's not about manipulating, it's about, persuading them. And then the first way you do
Yes.
that is just getting them to consider, saying like, hey, if it was done this way, is it a possibility that it could be done another way?
Yeah.
And when you leave that open, what happens now, you allow people to find it in their kind of unique walk that then will allow them to align, right, with what you're talking about or the truth of the situation. You're
Hmm.
giving them a new set of facts. And when we get people to align with their significance, their unique brilliance, ooh, you position them to the rise for impact. And
Mm.
so, I call it my car. I love acronyms. You'll find out about me. I call it the car. It's the vehicle that I use.
Right.
Hey, consider, align, and rise. Right, to
Oof.
find your unique shape, and that's what I try to do, man.
Got another book cooking?
Yeah, I got. Hey, you know what? Now that I've gone through this process, I'm walking in my unique shape. I'm not gonna stop. I've had, I was trying to write not necessarily this book at first, but I had been trying to write a book for the better part of the last 10 or 15 years. I got involved in ministry over 20, but I had been trying to write a book, stopping and starting. But when things line up and you hear the unctioning of the spirit working through you. Some of the white noise, the things that convolute,
Yeah.
your thought process or how you're dealing with things, they get muted, and you're able to hear now with a level of clarity that really promotes the vision that you want to walk in. And that's what
Yeah.
happened for me. It started again, my wonderful wife with all her wisdom, my mother, her and my mother came together last year. They bought me this incredible gift to work with another mentor who helped me to just kind of develop my thoughts. And that's how the book, got started a year ago. I wrote this book, within a year, and published it within the same year, simply because I got out of my own way. Even though I'd been helping people for the better part of 25 years, so much we can spend so much time pouring out, we don't make room for people to pour into it.
Yeah.
And
You,
you got to make room for that. You got to set yourself up. And this is why I'm such a proponent of coaching. Again, if you're going to choose intentional manhood, well, guess what? You got to be open to allow a man to coach you into being intentional in finding your manhood, and realizing that some of the things that you picked up, you may have to lay down and be open to new perspectives. So that gift that they gave me in working with that coach, she came along, and again, she helped me get rid of all that white noise and kind of get a little more focus. And we got it done. And again, it just kind of being reminded me of the very call of my life, which is to help um, unlock people's brilliance, help them get out of their way and define their unique purpose in what God created them to be.
I think that's an incredible thing, and a great gift that that your wife and would invest in you in that way. I think for so many men, I think a lot of the times the thing that we are missing is that invest in self piece. Like,
Yeah,
you know, we look at athletes, and living in Texas, we're surrounded by superstar athletes.
absolutely.
Dak Prescott, CD Lamb, all Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving,
Yes,
and the thing that they've had to do, they've invested millions upon millions upon millions of dollars into themselves.
yes,
Their support system have invested money in them before they were even able to invest money in themselves. And I think I really believe that every man wants to step into authentic manhood. They want to be intentional about, in living out this thing called being a man. I- God doesn't create any bums. I
no,
don't
he
think
doesn't.
I don't think that there is a
No, he
single
doesn't.
man alive right now who said, "When I grow up, I want to be a bum. I want to have broken relationships. I want to have broken children." No, no man grows up with that mentality.
Absolutely not.
But I also think that I think it's hard and I think it's hard. It's hard for women too, but being a woman is hard. But also being we don't talk about it enough, man. Being a man, it's hard.
Yes.
It is, and there are different kinds of hard, but it's hard nonetheless. And I think that a lot of times, by the time that we really realize that I don't know what manhood really is,
Mm,
the hard stuff is really hitting, and then it's hard for us to even break out and to ask for help. Like, it's easy to say, yo, Ralph, how about that? I don't know who your team is, but you know how about that football game? But I can't it's hard for me to call somebody up and say, Ralph, dude, I'm struggling with porn right now. or
yeah.
or
Ooh,
Ralph, I just, man, I got caught up. I got caught up with this woman, and I don't know how to do. Like, Ralph, I'm failing my kids. Ralph, how about this one? Ralph, I'm failing myself.
come on. Listen. Oh my goodness, those are such amazing points because that is where the rubber meets the road. This is how so many men cannot they miss the opportunity to gain traction because we feel unable to talk about those things that truly matter. What do? We distract ourselves by talking about the things that most of the time really don't mean a whole heck of a lot.
Right.
And the unforgiving part about being a part of this world, and again, I am not trying to compare a man to a woman, or in the sense
Right.
of the unique, the perspective can be different, but as a man, the thing that becomes really aware, it's that old thing that we kind of tell the little boys, we're pulled aside and told not to cry on
Mm-hmm.
some level, right? You suck it up. You know what I'm saying? And they teach girls how to tap in to become
Yes.
emotionally intelligent, emotionally aware. Now, some of those things have been misconstrued or kind of convoluted as of recently over the last maybe 20 to 30 years. But the fact is that they try to teach men how to suck it up, right? They'll call it like a warrior method or
Yeah.
something, but really what they do is they kind of cut a man right below his knees, because there's a reason why God gave us tear ducts. There's a reason why God gave us a heart. There's a
Right.
reason why we need to be able to tap into some level of sensitivity so we can experience empathy and sympathy and actually walk with some level of humility rather than false humility, right? But what ends up happening because of what we pick up and then the story we begin to write, we continue perpetuate a cycle that continues to move us down the road, that moves us from being truly, as you were talking about a moment ago, about being self-aware, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of who we really are. And I think that the one question that life asks, and this goes to men and women, the one thing that life is going to continue to ask us, right, is who are you really?
Yes.
Who are it comes in many different shapes and sizes. It comes
Mm-hmm.
in the forms of many different questions, but at the core, it's who are you really? How will you express yourself? I'm reminded of a line in John 1 that still to this day gives me goosebumps. It's when John the Baptist was, baptizing, and Jesus was just about to come on the scene. Um, and the Roman guards were questioning John about who he was going to say that he was. And it says in this passage here, it says, he did not fail in his confession, but confessed freely. And why that stands out to me, because if you read that whole chapter, you find out very quickly he starts with his confession about saying who he's not. He speaks to the part like, hey, I'm not this Messiah. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
prophet. He speaks to the part about where some people might seem it as a form of weakness. He speaks in this way. This is what I'm not. And he says, but then it says, he goes and he says, I'm the one calling in the wind, make the path straight for the Lord. He
Right.
then professes who he is. And this is how we fail in our confession. When we are uncomfortable in that place between what we call to be our virtues and what we call to be our weaknesses, when we are not fully aware of who we are, and embrace who we are, because the truth is we don't have another person to take ourselves to.
Right.
That this is who we are. When we're not in this place of being able to accept all that I am and all that I'm not, we will make up who we are, and that's what we profess. And then that's where things become problematic for us. And so when I realized that so much of my time was spent, I thought I was professing something that I wanted the world to see, but in actuality, I was hiding, right? I was just trying to keep people from finding out what I was ashamed of. But when I
Yeah.
realized my quirkiness, the unique way that I thought, some of those things that are weaknesses, that guess what? They will propel me further when I acknowledge them and say, hey, this is what I'm not, but yet and still, this is what I was able to do. This is what I think, but in spite of what I think, this is what I was able to accomplish, right?
Right.
When you speak like that, now you're fully showing up in a manner that's transparent, that now, guess what? You're speaking to the shame and the weakness in another person, and you're shining a light and say, hey, guess what? You're more than enough too. I think that is one of the more profound gifts that we can give to someone, when we fully embrace who we are, when we embrace our unique shape. And that's what I really hope to help people get beyond in their life and then in their leadership, in what, because somebody's waiting for you to get who you really are.
That's right. That's right. I say it often. Somebody is waiting on you to arrive.
Absolutely.
And this whole idea that life asks you, who are you really? That question will never stop coming to you over the
Never
course of
comes.
your life.
Yep.
Because at one point, it is asking you to establish who you want to be. At another point, it's going to ask you again to see if you're lining up with who you want to be. And then
Yep.
at another season, because we aren't supposed to stay the same, that question is going to come to see, how are you changing? How are you transforming at this time of life? Because I mean, yo, I'm 43 now. I forget that often. I'm 43 now, and I should not be the same person at 43 that I was at 23 or 33. Now, my 43 may not look like what your 43 look like. My
Absolutely.
33 may not look like what your 33 look like. And I think because so many men are wired for the competition portion of it, I think we get in trouble,
Yeah.
one, when we are comparing ourselves, our current self, to somebody else's highlights or whatever, or we're comparing ourselves to the wrong people. Like there's so many young men who are
Yeah.
comparing their lives to, to Drake and to Kanye and to, Kendrick Lamar, and
Yeah.
or we're comparing ourselves to, the top athletes and all this stuff. And while on some level, if you identify with what they do, that's one thing.
Yes.
But your life will never play out the way that somebody else's life plays out, because your life is for you.
Amen.
And
We
so if go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Finish. I want to that next point. Go ahead.
I think that if we're really going to lead, if we're really going to become, as you said, we have to be able to answer that question, who are you really? Because when you know who you are, it helps you to discover why you were put here in the first place.
Man,
And when
now,
you and
oof.
when yeah, and when you know the why, then the why becomes the vehicle for everything else. All of a sudden the why begins to the how begins to make sense. Then the avenues for impact really begins to, like, I'm going to tell you. The reason why I started this podcast
Mm-hmm.
is because I had gone through a phase when we moved from Missouri to Texas about 4.5 years ago. I
Okay.
was on staff at a church. I was a teaching pastor. We were children's pastors. I was speaking a lot. All this stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved to Texas, I had this expectation that because I felt like I was gifted,
Mm-hmm.
that people were going to see that and people were going to latch on to that. Then I could become, a speaker. Then I could become a coach. Then I would jump on the staff at somebody's church because I saw it in me. So I assumed everybody saw it in me, right?
Man, okay,
Move,
okay.
move,
I'm tracking with you.
move to Texas. Bro, I didn't step into a pulpit until early of 2023.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of time for me wondering, am I really even who is everything that I thought about myself, is that a lie? Like, God, like
Oh,
what is
preach.
really happening? Maybe I'm not, because I'd gotten to a point, dude, where I said, well, maybe I'm never supposed to preach again. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm never supposed to speak or anything. I'm just supposed to, maybe my job is just to be a husband and a father. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
Nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with
that.
that. However, I could not get away from the three hallmarks of my life, which are I love to motivate people, I love
Yes.
to inspire, and I love to encourage. And so I got to a point where I said, okay, if I'm not going to be able to do this from a pulpit, I'll do it on social media. And
Yes.
COVID,
Okay.
COVID came around, I started making videos. And then all of a sudden, back, I think in 2023, I got this idea. I started doing a series of podcasts called Your Daily Pep with Coach Jay.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I found it. I
Amen.
found it.
Yeah.
And, in launching this podcast, now it allows me to do what's in my heart.
Yes.
Because man, when life asked me, who are you really?
Yeah.
I had to lay down everything that I thought that I wanted to be, everything that I thought that I was meant to be. And I had to really stop and say, okay, who am I really in this moment? I'm a person who loves people. I'm a person who wants people to live their best life. And if that means I get rich off of this, hallelujah. But if it
Yes.
means that I don't
Think
get rich
about it.
off of this and my podcast only gets 5 listeners, can I be okay with that? When my answer was yes, I can be okay with that, then I knew that I was doing the right thing. And even though I've been doing this podcast for almost a year and a half,
Mhm.
I did an episode last week where I talked about how I thought about quitting because I had allowed myself to be fooled by looking at numbers. Numbers, haven't grown the way that I wanted them to. So maybe
Yeah.
nobody wants to know, maybe nobody's listening, but I had a moment where life said, who are you really?
Mm.
And I came back and I said, I am that person who, if I'm just sent here to reach one person, if that one person is listening to this podcast, I have to be faithful to my charge to that one person.
Okay. Justin. Oh my goodness. I got goosebumps while you were talking. Listen. I'm a firm believer that God does not do anything by just like coincidence. I think that when people come into your life, that definitely it can be for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime.
Yeah.
You and I finding each other, or being introduced and coming together the way that we did, was not by mistake. We are more kindred spirits than you could ever imagine.
And we're back with this episode of the Pep Talk Podcast. Wow. All I can say is wow. And I had to make the decision to split this interview into 2 parts because we talked for an hour and 40 minutes, y'all. An hour and 40 minutes. And just what you got now in this first episode, y'all, it gets so much better in episode 2 that's going to drop next Monday. So I'm telling you, you don't want to miss it. You want to be here for it. And also, drop us a line. Let us know what you think at thepeppodcast@gmail.com. Hit Ralph up at ralphbessard.com. Y'all, this This episode, if you think it went crazy, next week's episode is just going to be downright nuts. I want you to share this with your husbands, share it with your brothers, with your cousins, with your sons. If you're a man, if you're someone who loves men, then this episode is for you. Let us know what you got out of it. Hit me up at @_JB Speaks on Instagram. We want to hear from you. Drop us a 5-star review and rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're catching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think. But we'll see you next week for episode 35 of the Pep Talk Podcast, part 2 of this amazing interview with myself and Ralph Bessard. But you know how we ended, y'all. Keep it love, keep it light, and keep it